Welcome to DeFichain Demystified, where we dive deeper in special topics of DeFiChain. The goal is to bring some answers to some tricky questions and maybe bust some myths. We are
Yeah.
and Lord Mark, and today's topic is
What's the difference between native DeFi and the meta chain?
Welcome back, Kügi. Long summer break. How are you?
I'm perfectly fine. Summer is over here, so yes.
It's time to get it's time to get back to work, as it seems. Yeah, right. Cool. Is the weather so bad in Austria?
It was nice yesterday. Today it's raining and cold. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's the drama in Europe, right? The rain comes and it gets cold immediately. Hey, Kügi, thanks so much for coming on. We are moving along with the launch of DMC, DeFi Meta Chain, and I think there are a lot of questions out there, and a lot of confusion also, and a lot of new things to learn. And I'm so happy that you came up with the idea, Mark. Let's talk a little bit about the little but very important differences between all these different tokens and networks and addresses and whatever. And I'm sure you prepared a ton of cool information. And do you want to say a couple of introductory words, or do you want me to jump right into your amazing animations and presentations?
Let's do some quickie graphics. Yeah, no, it's let's just jump in because
Okay.
we want to talk and not make the video too long. So in general, the idea is that who should watch that and who maybe not take anything out of it. The idea is to have the people who know DeFiChain, who use DeFiChain, who know our native DeFi, and are now like, there's a DMC coming. We heard about that, but we don't know what EVM is, and there are differences.
Okay.
And there are some differences that are important to understand so that you don't make mistakes and don't fall into scams or something. Because I think that's one thing that's really important also to know and understand. When we have the DMC, we are EVM compatible. We
Okay.
have the huge thing where everything can happen, that everybody can do everything. So there is possibility that there will be rug pulls, there will be scams, there will be people who do bad stuff. We also have a lot of huge potential for positive things, but people need to be aware that there can be bad stuff too. And I think that's good to be prepared, and that's why we do that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Good.
And
Back to
now
the back to the animations.
you did a lot of animations.
Exactly.
Yeah. Usual QE graphics, super fancy. Let's start a quick recap on what we have on native DeFi, because I expect everyone to basically know that. We have our DeFi chain where we build on top of the UTXO level, we build our native DeFi layer. And there, the chain knows a lot of stuff. The chain knows what is a token, how does a DSD, the DeFi chain standard tokens, work. There are DBTCs and stuff like that. They are all just really, the chain knows there is a token can be sent somewhere. A token, an address can have a balance of a token. So even we have the DFI token, so the chain knows that this address, when we have the different types of addresses, but the chain knows that this address has this amount of this token. And also, if we have a DEX, the chain knows, so natively, what is a DEX and how does a DEX work? I can swap there and I can tell the chain with a transaction, please swap BTC to USDD, and then the chain does the composite swap and stuff like that and takes it from your account and gives you the result into the account. Same with the vaults, where we say, okay, the chain knows what is a vault. How can I add something to the vault, remove something from the vault? That's all something that the chain knows. That's why you use these tokens for the vaults, for the pool trading and everything. So that's all because the chain knows that there's one type of token, one type of DEX, how the DEX works and everything. That's our system where we have that all built into the chain natively.
Okay,
And
so
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 that's
so
also
so that actually means that a blockchain that is kind of a database, it's one massive central database that has all information written in one place, right?
I mean, yeah, but that's also in the EVM and everywhere. So that's every blockchain is everything is written
Yeah.
on that blockchain. Everything is on the
Okay.
blockchain. But it's also that the way a token works, the way a DEX works, the way
Okay.
that the vaults work are defined in the native code of the consensus. So it's not somewhere on top of that, but it's in the native code of the consensus, and the chain itself knows about it. And when I say the chain knows about it, let's look into the other side of the story, and that's the EVM level. And generally in EVM, we have addresses with balances of the native coin. And I write native coin here in this funny way, because I don't want to write ETH here or DFI or anything, because EVM, that's just a technology that has a native coin. And the EVM itself doesn't know how this coin is called or what it is or whatever. It's just, there is a native coin, and the native coin is the coin that's used to pay the gas fees. So to pay the processing power, basically. And it has addresses that have a balance in that coin. So we have, do I get the addresses? There I get the addresses. We have an address. It's this 0x and then something. It's a hex code. It's I think technically it's ERC55, the format of the address. And this can have a balance of this native coin. And the only additional thing is an address can also have code behind it. So I can create an address where I put code behind it. It's called a smart contract. And the chain knows how to execute that code. And this code can contain anything. And that's the Turing complete stuff that it's always talked about. And that's where the smart contract and everything comes in. But the chain doesn't know what this means, basically. So the chain knows there is a code behind it. That's a smart contract. I can execute the code. I know how to interact with that, because if one address sends a transaction to another address with this in the data of the transaction, the function name and the parameters and everything, it knows that if there's code behind that, it can call this function and execute this code. But within this code, you then have variables and states and whatever, but the chain doesn't know what that means. If there is a variable that says balance of x is, and it has a value of 100, the chain doesn't know that there is any meaning to that. So that's nothing with the chain. All the chain knows is the addresses with balance of native coin, nothing else, just the balance of the native coin, and the address can have a code behind it.
Okay.
The
Question.
address with the code can also have a balance of the native coin. So that's all, but that's it. That's all the chain knows, nothing more.
Okay, one question, Kuki. So on this address, there have to be some amount of the native coin, a fraction of the coin.
Doesn't have to.
Doesn't have to. Okay.
It could be, but same with DeFiChain, where I can have an address with zero balance.
Okay.
It is if this address wants to start a transaction, wants to do something, it needs the balance of the native coin in the address to pay the gas fees. Because if you send a transaction, you need to pay the gas fees in the native coin from your balance. So that's it. But a lot of smart contracts don't have a balance of the native coin, because they just interact. And if you interact with the contract, the address who starts the transaction pays the whole gas fees. So it could be that if you call the smart contract, and this smart contract calls another smart contract and stuff like that, it behaves internally as if this smart contract sends a transaction to the other address of the smart contract, but that's an internal transaction within this big transaction, and it's all paid from the beginning, from the initial standard, basically.
Another question, Kuki. You said EVM is a misleading name, right? So do I understand it right, that the Ethereum Foundation kind of invented the whole thing, but in some way it shouldn't be called Ethereum Virtual Machine, it should be maybe called Token Virtual Machine, because this exists on so many different blockchains and has nothing to do with Ethereum, besides that they invented it. Did I understand that correct?
I don't know if it was the Ethereum Foundation or whoever.
But somebody in the Ethereum...
The Ethereum blockchain started with that thing and invented it. Yes. And that's why they called it the Ethereum Virtual Machine, because it's a virtual machine for the Ethereum blockchain. But now this technology is used on different blockchains. And now if you say Ethereum Virtual Machine and it's running on the Binance Smart Chain, it's like, what? So, or a different way around. The Binance Smart Chain is executing stuff in Solidity. So maybe now it should be called, I wouldn't call it Token Virtual Machine, because there are no tokens.
Okay.
We come to that. Maybe Solidity Virtual Machine, because Solidity is the language of the coding language. But basically, it's a virtual machine that can execute code, and it was first done by Ethereum, and that's why it's called Ethereum virtual machine. And that's why all the standard tools have as the native coin, they call it ETH, because that's the most common and first use of it. But for us, for the meta chain, we also have an EVM. It's an EVM. It's a virtual machine from the technology. But our native coin is called DFI. So it's
So it's kind of the thing, like, for example, you have these paper handkerchiefs and somebody came up and invented the tempo, and now everybody talks about the tempo, and then, you know what I mean? Just a brand or something became kind of the most common words to describe this thing. Okay, got it. Okay.
But it's the other way around, that when they invented it, they called it the Ethereum virtual machine, so everybody is calling it that now. Okay. So that's one important thing, And because we talk about the token, let's directly dive into that concept, because everybody knows this. Yeah, we have these ERC20 tokens on EVM. So everybody, it's a lot of talk about that. And in the end, as I said, the chain itself knows there's a balance of native coin in here. On DeFi chain, on the native DeFi, we have a balances of the tokens because the chain knows about tokens. In the EVM, chain doesn't know anything about any token. The ERC20, maybe the ERC, it's just short for Ethereum Request for Command, which is basically like our DFIPs, where they have like improvements and talk about stuff. And they have like, okay, let's talk about this. And this is then the 20th of those requests for commands was the request for command about this token standard, where they decided, it's the core foundation. Vitalik was part of that, and everyone, where they talk about how to define a token standard and how should a smart contract look like, what should a smart contract do, or what function should it provide, so that we use it as a token. And that's what ERC20 token means now, because it's ERC20 token is basically a smart contract that fulfills this ERC20 definition. That's where ERC20 comes from. So if there was some other request for command before, it would be ERC21 now. That's also why the NFTs, for example, I don't know what the number is, but it's also an ERC some number, because the
request was in this proposal.
That was the number of the request.
Exactly. Okay, cool, excellent.
And so an ERC20 token is basically just a smart contract, a normal smart contract deployed to an address, and that's why you always have a token address, because that's for someone coming from native DeFi. It's like if I want to interact with a token, I need to import the token address, and it's always like check your token address that you use the right token. And that's because anybody could deploy a smart contract that fulfills the ERC20 standard to any address and call it as they want. So there is no one USDD on Ethereum, for example. There is the official USDD that has the token address where I say, okay, that's the USDD that are deployed and where they maintain it and everything, and that's the official one.
But so the official stablecoin, but there could be a copy or some fake.
A lot. I'm pretty sure there are hundreds of copies who say they have the symbol, but the important thing is to check token address, because then you know, okay, that's the smart contract. And how is it working? Because that's also the important stuff. It's just a smart contract with these functions, and the balances and how it works is internally within the smart contract. So it's not when you have a balance of 100 USDD on Ethereum, on Ethereum, it's not that your address has this balance and the chain knows that for some reason. It's that the official USDD smart contract at that address has an entry that your address has 0.1 USDD. And they keep track of that. So the smart contract of the token keeps track of what address has what balance. And if you want to send a token, you're not telling the chain to send a token, you're sending a transaction to the smart contract from the token and tell it to please take that amount from my account and move it there. So update your internal numbers so that now they have the balance. And you can ask the contract, what balance does this address have?
Okay, Küge, a lot of questions. So, first question. A smart contract, there's this mysterious word out there. I think it's really cool to understand a little bit better what's a smart contract. What's the shortest smart contract somebody can write? So does a smart contract have to be a long? I understand it like is like a piece of code with information inside. Is this code like fixed, or can a smart contract alter itself? Because you said it stores the amount of tokens, so there must be a way that the contract in some way stores new information in itself, or how does this work?
So the smallest smart contract is having no code at all. It's just
okay.
No. Basically, you could make a smart contract with no functions, so it's basically behaving as a normal address.
Okay.
Because then it's just an empty code. Or you have a smart contract that has just one function that gives you a string back and says hello.
Like hello.
The classic hello world, where you call that function.
Okay.
Beside that, it can be everything. It can be a really huge thing, and it has internal variables that's like the database, where it stores those states and those variables, arrays of numbers or whatever, dictionaries and stuff like that, where you call the function. The function does something, updates those variables, changes those variables, all within the smart contract. So a smart contract can only interact with other smart contracts by calling their functions, but it can't directly say your value changes. It needs to call a function. So if the other smart contract allows via a function to do that, everything, then you can change other smart contracts and interact with them.
Would it be correct then to say a smart contract is written in Solidity, that's a programming language, and there's code with kind of commands, and also the possibility to store data in the smart contract in kind of a database?
Yes, but I wouldn't say in the smart contract. It's part of the smart contract. It's part of the numbers of the smart contract. So it's within the scope of the smart contract, but it's stored on the blockchain. So all the things are on the blockchain.
So they are written, they're calculated in a smart contract, and the result is written out onto the blockchain.
Yeah, it's basically, I mean, in the end, it's not saved in the blockchain. The transactions are saved on the blockchain. So if you execute all the functions, your local state of the blockchain has the correct states. So it's kind of in this, like our balances and stuff. They are not stored in the blockchain, if you want it like that, because you don't have a block that says the balance of this address is now. You have a list of transactions that changes the balance. So if you execute all those transactions, at the end, you know that's now my balance. Because all those transactions executed, you have the balance. So it's your state that you update. But basically, it's based on the data from the blockchain. So you don't need any other database or anything, just what's happening on the blockchain.
Cool, I understand. Fantastic. Question back. You said ERC20 because it was the 20th proposal. Now we know on Binance Smart Chain, there's a BEP20 token. And then in some way on DeFiChain is also going to be a token. I would like to hear from you, why is the BEP20 called BEP20? Makes no sense for me, or maybe I'm wrong. And how is our token then called, and how is this coming along? Where does the name come from?
Because ERC20 has the number 20 in it, and everybody talks about if they say a token. If you say I can interact with an ERC20 token, or this is a new ERC20 token, that got so like tempo. That's like everybody got used to. An ERC20 token is a token. So when another EVM uses a token, they call it a BEP20 token, because that's our ERC20 basically.
That was the Binance, Ethereum, whatever, or where the BEP comes from, we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. And also the ordinal tokens, it's a BRC20. Where
makes actually no sense, right? Makes actually not much sense, right?
Well, it makes sense in a way that you say, okay, ERC20 is the word for token. And if I know ERC20 is a token, and I now say, okay, now I want to buy a Bitcoin token, let's call it BRC20, because everybody knows ERC20. So let's call it ERC20, because that's I mean, it makes sense on every Ethereum, on every EVM, because they are this these functions and this interface definition is the same. I don't know if the ordinal tokens have an interface like that and anything. So there it wouldn't make that much sense to say it's based on the ERC20. It's just that, But so there is no deeper meaning to the 20.
Okay.
It's just.
And on DeFiChain, it's gonna be called.
We come to that.
Okay.
Spoiler.
Season 2 is coming soon, right?
No. One thing that's important to understand, in my opinion, is really this: you don't have the balance.
Okay.
The balance is within the token. And one thing, there are usually the smart contract is you can't update the smart contract, but there are ways to say the smart contract on this address is not containing the code, but it's just proxy that forwards all the calls to a different smart contract. And then you can update it because you can change this forwarding address. So it changes the address, and so you can update the code. It's good for updating security-wise, but it's not. You can update it the way you want it if you own the address. And the thing is, since you don't own that, you need to trust whoever created the token, whoever maintains the smart contract. If Tether now decides we are rugging the whole community, they could just say we're updating the whole smart contract and say now this address, our address has all the tokens and everyone else has no token.
Okay.
And they can do that by updating the contract. And then everything is gone because they just say, from now on, nothing's happening anymore.
Sounds scary.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. As soon as the smart contract is updatable, you need to trust the ones who maintain it that it's not changeable. That's on the native DeFi side. You need to update the whole code. You need to update the consensus code, and all the nodes who run the code needs to update their node. And if the community says no, that's not how we do it, this new code is not good, then it doesn't happen. On the Ethereum side, if the owner of the smart contract updates the smart contract, it's updated, and you can't stop that basically.
So it sounds, and I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of good explanation how we can protect ourselves. But in a moment, it sounds like it's the perfect place for all the internet gangsters out there, because it could be used very easily to scam people if you're not aware of certain things.
Right? And that's why rug pulls happen, because you can do stuff like that. Okay. And that's why I'm a big fan of our native DeFi, and that's why I think we were able to manage to get such a high TVL with such a low market cap project, because in the native DeFi side, it's not that easy to make it, or kind of not possible, as long as the project doesn't rug pull. The DeFi side, the tokens, the balances, the DEX can't just stop working or anything. And that's the big difference on a security and safety level. And there's another thing that's, in my opinion, worse or even more scary, or that you need to be aware of. Because the one thing is that I say, okay, Tether likely won't just change their code to make it a bad code. So you have to trust Tether, but whoever issues that token or maintains that token. But the thing is, since the chain doesn't know about the balance, it's kind of hard to say, if you interact now with a DEX, that you can send them the token to swap and stuff like that. Because if you interact on the chain on our side, if I tell the DEX I tell the chain to swap the token, the chain can take the balance from my account and swap it to the other one, because it knows what it's doing and it has the rights to do that. Here, the DEX smart contract has generally no rights to tell the USDD smart contract to change the balance, because if the DEX smart contract can tell it to change something, everybody could take funds from my account, and we don't want it. So the solution to that is that they invented this approve method to say, okay, me as an owner of the address, I can tell the the ERC20 smart contract that I allow this other contract to move my funds. So I allow the DEX to move up to 1,000 USDD from my account somewhere else. That's what I approve. And then first I need to approve that with a transaction, and then I tell the DEX now swap. and then the DEX tries to take the funds from my account, and if I approved it, it all works out. Otherwise, it's fixed. And that's why when you work on EVMs and on a DEX, you always have first this button approve, where you sign a transaction to approve this transaction, to approve the stuff. And then you have a second transaction that actually swaps the stuff.
Okay.
And there is the big challenge, because it could be, let's say we then have the DUSD and the SPYs and everything on the DMC, and you have a DEX where you can swap that, and you have your DUSD on the DMC. And now some other scammer, bad actor, comes along and says, I create a fake DUSD or a play DUSD. Let's call it play DUSD. And I pretend to be a casino where I give you 1 million play DUSD just for signing up as a faucet, and then you can play with this DUSD in my casino, and you can play around. It's just a game. Everything's fine. No worries. You go to the website. You do that. You get the play DUSD, and then for interacting, you need to first approve the play DUSD that the smart contract can do that, and then you do the transaction. And now they, instead of doing creating a transaction to approve play DUSD, they create a transaction to approve the real DUSD. So they trick you into approving that this smart contract can now do with your DUSD whatever they want. And if you don't look closely, if you just, because you think, all fun and games, and you approve the transaction without looking what you're approving and without checking what you're approving, it might be that you approve transaction, or you approve this smart contract
to suck your account dry.
Take your DUSD out, and then it's gone. And then you do the other transaction, and your DUSD are gone.
Okay.
And that's something you really need to check, because it could be that display DUSD are just also called DUSD, so that it's more fun. And then you need to check the token address, because otherwise you can't know what you approve. And that's where scammers really have a possibility to take that out. And that's what people need to be aware of, that we have that with the new possibilities of EVM. We have the risk that people use it in a bad way. And if you're not used to that, if you don't know that there could be multiple DUSD, there could be different ways of doing that. There could be people who act badly, because in the native DeFi world, we are like in our safe space where there are no bad actors who just do a project and then scam people, because they need to go into the code to change that. So we can trust that the DEX does what we want it to do. We can trust that the tokens work as they should. So in the EVM now, there's a lot more possibilities, positive and negative. And I think people need to be aware of that, that ERC20 tokens are not chain native tokens. It's just a standard on top of the native EVM. And it has these risks of, if you don't have the token address right, you might either get the wrong. Also, if someone says, I sent you USDD or DUSD on the DMC, you send me DFI back. So just do an OTC trade. And they send you something, it comes up as DUSD or USDD in your address, because they say, yeah, it's an ERC20 token that's called DUSD, so we show it to you. But in the end, it's a different token, because they just created a different token. So you need to check the address of the token, what you get and what you send and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So be aware of that, because otherwise you are running risks of getting scammed or whatever. And beside that, that's on a focus on the ERC20. And generally, everything, DEXs, vaults, whatever, the chain doesn't know about anything, and they are all just smart contracts. So there's also not one DEX. There is not, I swap on DMC. I need to say, okay, I swap on vanilla swap on DMC, or I swap in the Jellyverse on DMC, or whatever. There are different tokens. There are different smart contracts. There are different things. So yeah.
Okay. So
that's
now,
important to know.
Okay, that's awesome. Also, let's say that's very good information. It's not awesome that these things can happen. So now a lot of people might say, "Oh my God!" So everybody's waiting for DMC, but that sounds so risky. Maybe let's explain a little bit in short words why is all the risk worth actually doing this? Because I don't want that people leave our little conversation here and maybe say, oh my God, we were waiting on this, but it's actually awful and scary, and maybe you can
Let's
spend
let's
some
let's
time on.
maybe take the other side
Okay.
and say, okay, what's really changing in terms of the possibilities and what we do and why we
Exactly.
do that? Because in my opinion, yes, it sounds a bit scary, and I'm a bit focusing on the be aware of, because people tend to underestimate that and then run into scams and problems, and we don't want that.
Okay. But
So
there's a good reason why we do this. I think this is important that
yeah,
we,
and let's go into that a bit.
Cool.
Right now, if you look at the whole ecosystem, we have the existing Ethereum with the Ethereum virtual machine with the native coin ETH. We have Bitcoin with the UTXO level, with it's called Bitcoin, the UTXOs. And on our DeFi chain side, we have basically everything. We have the not moving. We have the UTXOs, DFI as UTXO level, where we have the same UTXO technology as Bitcoin. Then we build on top of that our native DeFi with our token system, with the vaults, with the DEX and everything, where we have DFI as a token, and you can transfer the DFI from UTXOs to tokens and back, so between those domains. And now we are also adding an Ethereum virtual machine, which can do exactly the same thing as the whole Ethereum net chain, basically. So everything that can be done on Ethereum can now also be done on MetaChain within DeFiChain, where only difference is that we have DFI as a native token, where here it's called ETH and here it's called DFI, and we can move that. So the main point why this is, I wouldn't say necessary, but good and is a huge improvement, is as we had it before, that we said, okay, on the DMC or on native DeFi, if we want to change something, the code needs to be changed. If we want to implement options now, for example, the native consensus code needs to implement options and needs to do that, and needs to, the core devs needs to provide that. With DMC, suddenly everybody could provide that. Everybody can build something like Jellyverse, where we say, okay, these 8 pools with 8 different tokens in a pool, or this lending and the bonds there and everything. Everybody in the community can, or from outside of the community, from EVM developers or anything, can do something and build something on top of our DeFi chain, on top of our native DeFi, and on top of that, and use that. And so there's huge possibilities, and we open up to a lot of new projects that people who are in DeFi chain can easily use by just moving the domain from here to here and then use that. But it's always with great
Risks.
possibilities come great risks, basically. And that's
Cookie, this is, I think, the analogy that we used so many times. I said before we had this beautiful garden with the big wall around, but you could only interact and trade within the walls, right? And now we open it up, and imagine you have this fantastic flourishing castle in medieval age, and you open the gates now, and now a trade becomes possible inside, outside. But of course, there are gonna be some scammers or bad actors coming in and out of the castle now as well, right? And we just have to be aware to catch them or not fall for these scams. But I think the walled garden is a very good analogy to our old system. Yeah.
exactly. And they are also because the question comes up a lot during when you talk about stuff. So let's go a bit into the things and the differences, or what you need to be aware of. The first thing is we have our native addresses, where we have UTXOs and native DeFi. That's our addresses. And on Ethereum level, or on EVM level, so in the upper area, we have the ERC55 addresses, these hex addresses. And they behave exactly the same on the meta chain as on the Ethereum. You have the private key, you can use it the same way everywhere. So that's the same thing. As soon as you use it already in Ethereum, you can use the same address with your same tools on the DMC, and the other way around. But, not but, next step is The same thing with smart contracts. If you deploy a smart contract on Ethereum, you can deploy the same smart contract on MetaChain. You can interact here the same way you interacted here. You can send stuff. So it behaves exactly the same way, which is why we do it like that. So everybody who is used to EVM on any other EVM machine, they can, or other EVM chain, they can do it the same way in MetaChain, which is the good way to do it, and attracts new people. But what's important is it's a different chain. If you use MetaChain, you are not working on Ethereum, and so you can't do cross-chain stuff. And that's something you need to be aware of, also for deploying smart contracts, because people are like, if I now deploy a smart contract, is it deployed on Ethereum, and stuff like that? Because it's the same address, I can use the same address and everything. Be aware, you can't send anything from here directly onto here. If you send DFI natively or a token or anything from this address to 0x456, you never send it here, but it always ends up on the same chain on this side. If you deploy something on DMC, it's deployed here. If you deploy it on EVM, it's here, and you can't interact cross-chain with a smart contract. You need a bridge for that. There might be bridges for that. But it's not that as soon as you do it, it's on both or whatever. It's really on the chain that you deploy it. There it is. There you can interact with it. That's also why stuff like Uniswap or Vanilla Swap is basically a Uniswap. It's the same code or similar code, but it's deployed here because you can't interact with Uniswap from the DMC. You need Uniswap or something like that deployed on the DMC so you can interact with that on the DMC. So always be aware on what chain you are, because otherwise you end up sending something, especially regarding exchanges. If you send something to an exchange and they provide you with an ERC55 address, don't assume that it's a DMC address. Check what chain it is. If they are on the Ethereum chain and you send them native DFI on DMC and they don't allow for DMC, you just send it to the void and you will likely not get it back because the exchange says, yeah, okay, we might have the private key and can use the address here, but we are not looking into or changing our infrastructure to apply for DMC. On the other hand, it's also because it's EVM and the same tools apply and can be used. Any exchange that already has a EVM access and has ERC20 tokens listed is likely to be, or is faster to adapt to the DMC by just using the same tools and just use a different RPC address and chain ID, and then they can maybe list our tokens or anything. Okay. So that's also a good thing, but also to be aware where you send it.
Quick, a short question, because you just mentioned that. We have DFI as ERC20 in ERC20 standard before, right?
Yes, here.
This was here, yeah.
This is here. We have DFI as an ERC20 token on Ethereum. That's a token here. And that's the thing, if you have this DFI here and you send it around here, it's a standard ERC20 token, it's not here. Same with the DFI that we have on Binance Smart Chain. There's also DFI token on Binance Smart Chain, but you need the bridge.
Right. It's
the same thing that the ERC20 DFI is not the same as the PEP20 DFI. It's the same thing here. Now we have DMC as another EVM, and it's a different chain. It's the same standard, it's the same technology, but it's a different chain. I mean, so with DFI,
means
it's also
we have at the end at least 4 different DFI. We have the UTXOs, we have the one on DeFi MetaChain, we have the one ERC20 standard, and we have the one on BEP20 standard. So we have at least 4 different DFIs, right? And they are not in some way
5 now, because we have those 3 and the ERC and Binance Smart Chain.
Yeah, 5. So that means
that's the ones who basically represent the same DFI, because they are backed with real DFI. Because here it's also, those DFI are not created new or something. You have to transfer it from here. So the total market cap, the total circulating supply is not changing. It's just moved. It's basically moved from here to here or back. So that's it. And maybe also this, why is it also maybe good for the DFI price and the whole thing? Because right now we have the DFI UTXOs for transaction fee here. So that's why you really need DFI. It's also used for collateral. It's also used for the pools. And with the DMC, we now have this unique, because it's a native token, and you need to pay the gas fees in DFI. So that's where every address that wants to interact on the DMC needs DFI on that level, which takes DFI out of this circulating supply, because there's more demand. And maybe also for collateral in projects, for token, for pools and everything. So there's additional that, but that's not a must. Projects can work on DMC without having DFI as collateral or anything. They can do their own projects, whatever. But anyone who is interacting with any project on here needs to pay the gas in DFI. And as they do it on Ethereum, we burn part of this gas fee is burned from the DFI. So the more DMC is used, the more DFI is burned. And that's also something to consider regarding the future of the
because we know that Ethereum is a deflationary chain, at least in some months or some weeks, because the gas fees are so high and so much Ethereum is burned for transactions. That's exactly what could happen here as well, that the transactions are eating up the inflation in some way, right?
Okay. I mean, we have a bit higher inflation than Ethereum right now, but that's the step, and we need to see how much is burned and how much is used and how this is playing out. But that's exactly the way we are going. And one thing regarding the tokens, because we had these tokens, and first it was not sure when we will see that, because you can transfer the DFI, the native stuff. And now it's highly likely, because it's close to being finished, that we will see also the transfer of our D tokens from native DeFi to DMC and back, so that you have the native transfer, no bridge. It's directly within the same transaction, same as this is happening. We will have this DST20, and that's the ERC20 of our DSDs. So that's why the 20 is in there, which is basically just the possibility that you can take your D tokens, whatever, DBTC, DUSD, whatever, all DSDs, and transfer it to the DMC and use it there as an ERC20, which means at the moment we start with the DMC, we will have this possibility, and smart contracts here can use it. So you can have, once vanilla swap is there and the pool is created, you can have a DUSD SPY pool there, or a DUSD Tesla, a DUSD BTC pool there, and everything. So you have the additional demand for those tokens here, because you need it as collateral on the DMC, but also projects, smart contracts on the DMC can build on the D token system, can build on that and use that, because you have it, the plus minus 5% with the future swap, you have it in a native level, and with the transfer of the tokens, because it's the same token just transferred, you can build on that here, and have your prices and everything. So that's also something that is, I think, good to know, or important to know, that we will have that from the beginning. And now you know where this 20 from the DST20 comes from.
Maybe a last question from my side. Let's say there's a token out there, a token that doesn't exist on DeFiChain at the moment. Let's say, what project? Let's say Link. If I want to have Link as DST20 token, how does a Link ERC20 token, or I don't know if Link is even ERC20 or Link is whatever, how do I get the token on the DeFi meta chain that is not on DeFiChain at the moment? Does it have to be bridged, or how does this work?
I mean, in the end, the thing is, everything we have natively, we can directly take.
I understand.
Here.
That's the easy way, right?
So the one way would be to have Cake web it on the native side and then transfer it. And the other way is the same way as you get it on Ethereum, or as you get it on the Binance Smart Chain or anything. Someone needs to create the token, be the official backer of the token, because if you have a bridge or something, you need to have some way of knowing that this is the real link, and that if you have a link on DMC, you can always exchange it for the real link, so that the price is the same and everything. So you have this reference. Same as you have if you have USDD on Tron or on Ethereum, how do you know that it's always the same, or always a USDD? Because and that's because Tether is directly supplying it.
Okay.
And that's with every token. Either you back it and say, okay, I'm now the official backer, and then people need to trust you, because that's also the thing. If someone now says, here's my link token DMC, I created the link token, I ensure you that that's a real link, and you can always redeem it on my site if you have a link DMC. And that's just some scammer, and it sells you a lot of those tokens, and then you try to redeem it and you don't get it. That could happen. So there again, be careful who you trust, what you do, and yeah, there we also have this with the BTC and everything with the DSD20, where we have the trust from the native side.
Absolutely. Okay, but that's really good to know for everybody out there, because I heard before the people said, oh, this is so fantastic because now I can use all kind of ERC20 tokens. It's a no in some way. It has to be still bridged over because we are not Ethereum, we are still DeFiChain. Okay.
It's a different thing.
It's a complete different thing. But I think the learning for me here is just be very careful what you do. It's super open, very flexible. A lot of stuff can be built, and we are we're gonna see a lot of new projects coming in and building on our virtual machine on DeFi MetaChain. But as a user, you have to be just a little bit more careful and don't just trust that everything's gonna be fine like it was in the past because it was DeFiChain. It's gonna be a little bit more complex. But
I mean, maybe it's also important to understand that if you are used to DeFiChain and you like the native DeFi, you can stay on the native DeFi level and don't use DMC. If you're scared of DMC, smart contract risks or anything, if you stay here, this one doesn't affect you. No one can do anything with your native tokens as long as you don't bridge them. You have to actively bridge them, that anything can happen there. Even if you go on any website that wants you to approve anything in MetaMask, if you don't use it and you don't have anything moved explicitly here via our native tools, you don't run any risk. Because maybe that's also one thing to understand. We have our wallets that work on that level, and we have the standard EVM tools that work on that level, which is good that they can work here, but MetaMask has no access to our native DeFi level. That's why you have to bridge it if you want to use it, or bridge it. You have to move it in the domain if you want to use it. But if you don't move it, you don't run any risks from the EVM side regarding your native stuff. So don't be afraid. If you want to use it, it's a huge possibility, it's huge stuff. But if you don't,
what cool icon is this next to the fox? It looks like some shark opening its mouth or something like this.
No, I think that's the lower part of the Ethereum.
Okay, and on top's a brain or
a brain and headphones. That's the Remix. That's an online tool to build smart contracts.
Okay. I thought it looks scary. It looks like a shark opening his mouth with his big teeth or something like this. Okay. Hey, Kügi, I don't know. Is this the end of your presentation?
Yeah, I think we are far over time. So
cool. There's no overtime. I think this was so good insight in these things, and thanks a lot for preparing all these slides. There's always a ton of work, and I think it's really easy to follow along, even if you're not a developer or have a very technical background. Kügi, thanks a lot again. That's awesome. I think we're gonna make a second episode or third episode about DeFi MetaChain pretty soon. There's so much more to learn. But for today, let me just switch back that we see you better here. For today, I think that's awesome. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. And,
cool.
And stay safe.
Stay safe. Yeah, everybody, don't be scared, right? I mean, sailing over the ocean can be sometimes a little bit tricky, and some people maybe lost their lives in the past, but also we explored new continents and other worlds and made new trades. So I think there's everywhere a little bit risk, right, in expanding your kind of, in going out in the world. And that's what we are doing at the moment now with DeFiChain. And I think that's absolutely necessary. Playing in the gated community, it becomes quite boring and is maybe not the best solution.
But as I said, before you scare people with losing their lives.
It was a bit dramatic, I know, but
if you want to stay, you don't run any risks because of
don't go out.
That's a good thing. Exactly. You don't run any risks because of DMC unless you really actively say, I want to participate in this new world. then I run the risks of the new world. If I don't want to, I
home.
stay in my walled garden and everything's fine.
Famous last words. Fantastic. Kügi, thanks again and see you soon in the next episode. Everybody out there, thanks for watching. Leave us a like, especially Kügi, for this fantastic presentation. Write us in the comments what you want to see. Yeah, and let's stay in touch. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.